The vineyard estate glowed under the late afternoon sun, rows of perfectly manicured vines stretching toward the hills. Pink and blue balloons arched over the entrance to the grand tasting room, and a massive sign read, "It's a girl," in elegant gold lettering. My younger sister Lauren's gender reveal party was everything she had dreamed of: expensive, Instagram perfect, and centered entirely on her. I arrived quietly, wearing a simple cream linen dress and minimal makeup. I chose a seat near the back, away from the main group of 30 guests. Laughter and excited chatter filled the air as women cooed over tiny onesies and compared notes on baby registries. Lauren stood at the center like a queen, her hand resting on her rounded belly, glowing with satisfaction. Our mother hovered nearby, beaming with pride. Aunt Valerie settled into the chair beside me, wine glass in hand. "Isn't this just beautiful? Another granddaughter for your mother. She's over the moon." Before I could respond, my cousin Brooke leaned in, lowering her voice in what she clearly thought was a discreet whisper. "And what about you, Olivia? When are you going to make your mother a grandmother too?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Brooke continued, without waiting. "I mean, after everything that happened with your divorce and, the complications, it must be so hard watching Lauren get everything you wanted." Aunt Valerie's face softened into practiced pity. "Oh, honey, we all know how difficult it's been for you. The doctors were very clear after your accident, weren't they? Some dreams just aren't meant to be." I kept my expression calm, fingers loosely holding my glass of sparkling water. "I'm happy for Lauren. Truly." "Of course you are," Mom said, appearing behind us with a plate of delicate appetizers. Her voice carried that gentle, sorrowful tone she reserved for these moments. Olivia has always been so supportive, even with her own limitations. The word limitations hung in the air like perfume, sweet on the surface, heavy underneath. Lauren called for everyone's attention, her voice bright and melodic. "Thank you all for coming today. This means the world to Ryan and me. We can't wait to meet our little girl." She paused, her eyes finding me across the room. "And I just want to say, I feel so blessed. Not everyone gets to experience this kind of joy. Some women face challenges that make motherhood impossible, and my heart truly goes out to them." Sympathetic glances turned toward me from every direction. Some women offered small, pitying smiles. Others nodded knowingly. The games began, guessing the baby's weight, blindfolded baby food tasting, matching celebrity babies to their parents. I participated when asked, smiled when expected, and checked my watch discreetly. 2:47 p.m., 13 more minutes. Mom sat down beside me after a while, placing her hand over mine. "How are you really doing, sweetheart? Honestly, this must be incredibly hard, watching your little sister step into motherhood when you can't." "I'm fine, Mom. I'm genuinely happy for her." She squeezed my hand with practiced gentleness. "It's okay to grieve what you've lost. The accident changed everything. The doctor said the damage was too severe. You've been so brave, but it's all right to admit you're mourning the children you'll never have." "I'm not mourning anything. Denial is a normal stage, darling. 5 years is a long time to carry this burden alone. No husband, no children, just that little job of yours. It must feel so empty sometimes." I took a slow sip of water and checked my watch again. 2:51 p.m., 9 more minutes. Aunt Margaret joined us, full of well-meaning confidence. "Have you considered adoption, Olivia? I know it's not the same as having your own, but it could give your life some purpose." "My life has purpose." Mom sighed softly. "You're 36 now. A successful career is wonderful, but at the end of the day, you go home to silence. No little voices calling you mommy. That's not the future we wanted for you." The conversation swirled around me like a current. Pity, superiority, gentle corrections about my reality. Lauren opened gifts, gasping dramatically over each one while shooting me occasional sympathetic looks. 2:59 p.m. 1 more minute. Lauren stood again, rubbing her belly. "I just want to say one more thing. Being able to carry this baby has made me appreciate how precious motherhood is, especially seeing what some women have lost. I hope being an aunt will give Olivia at least a small taste of that joy, even if it's only secondhand. The condescension was thick enough to taste. Mom dabbed at her eyes theatrically. That's so generous of you, Lauren. So kind to include your sister despite her circumstances. 3 p.m. exactly. The wide glass doors at the back of the tasting room opened. My husband, Dr. Marcus Hale, walked in first, tall, composed, still wearing his dark blue scrubs from the hospital. Behind him came our nanny, Sophia, pushing a double stroller. In it sat our 2-year-old twins, Noah and Isabella, with their dark curls and bright, curious eyes. Marcus carried our 6-month-old daughter, Grace, in a baby carrier against his chest, while our 4-year-old son, Ethan, held his hand. Every head in the room turned. The chatter died instantly. Marcus crossed the room to me with that quiet confidence I loved, leaned down, and kissed my forehead. Sorry we're a few minutes late, love. The valve replacement ran longer than expected. I stood, smoothing my dress, and lifted Isabella from the stroller. She immediately wrapped her arms around my neck. Mama. Noah reached for me too. Mama, up. Grace cooed happily in Marcus's arms, waving her tiny fists. The room remained completely silent except for the soft sound of a champagne glass slipping from someone's fingers and shattering on the tiled floor. The drive home along the winding vineyard roads felt different that afternoon. Golden light filtered through the oak trees, and the distant hills glowed soft amber. I kept the windows down, letting the warm air brush across my face. No tears. No rage. Just a deep, steady calm that had settled in my chest the moment Marcus and the children walked through those doors. Our house sat on a quiet hillside overlooking the valley, a modern Mediterranean-style home with wide terraces and a garden that the kids loved. When I pulled into the driveway, Sophia was already helping the little ones out of their car seats. Ethan ran to me first, throwing his arms around my legs. Mama, we saw you at the party. I scooped him up and kissed his forehead. You did, sweetheart. You all looked so handsome and beautiful. Isabella toddled over next, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Noah followed, demanding to be carried too. Grace cooed from Marcus's arms as he walked toward me, still in his scrubs. Long day? I asked, leaning in for a quick kiss. Worth it to see their faces, he replied with that quiet smile I loved. You handled it with more grace than most people could manage. Inside, the house filled with the familiar sounds of our life. Little feet on hardwood floors, Sophia preparing snacks, the soft hum of the baby monitor. I changed into comfortable clothes and sat on the terrace with a cup of tea while the twins played nearby, and Ethan showed me his latest drawing. Later that evening, after the children were bathed and tucked in, I sat in the quiet of my home office. Marcus joined me, handing me a glass of wine. Want to talk about it? He asked gently. I told him everything. The pitying comments, the public declarations of my limitations, the way my mother had turned my sister's celebration into a eulogy for my supposed brokenness. He listened without interrupting, then took my hand. You don't owe them your truth until you're ready. But when you are, I'll stand beside you. His steadiness grounded me, the same way it had since we met at that medical conference 6 years ago. The next morning I did something I hadn't done in years. I left my phone on silent and drove to the lab early. Dr. Rachel Kim, my mentor and co-founder of our biotech company, looked up from her monitor as I walked in. She was in her late 50s, sharp-minded and direct, the kind of woman who had built her career pushing boundaries in cardiac device technology. You're early, she observed, studying my face. Rough weekend. I told her the full story. The gender reveal, the layers of pity, the public labeling of me as incomplete and damaged. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair. So they still see you as the tragic older sister, she said. Even after all these years. I nodded. They built an entire narrative around my divorce and the accident. I never corrected them because I wanted privacy. Now that privacy has become their weapon. Rachel gave a short, knowing laugh. You've been carrying this company on your shoulders while raising 4 children and supporting a neurosurgeon's schedule. And they pity you. The irony is almost poetic. That day we reviewed the latest trial data for our newest minimally invasive heart valve device. The results were stronger than expected. Hospitals were already lining up for the next phase. This wasn't just a job, it was work that saved lives, work I had built from the ground up after my divorce. By evening I felt clearer. I stopped at the small market on the way home and picked up fresh ingredients for dinner. No one asked why I wasn't married with children by now. No one offered gentle corrections about my empty life. The silence in our home was warm, filled with the sounds of our real life. A few days later, I decided it was time for more space. I answered an ad for a peaceful guest house on a quiet property nearby. The owner was Mrs. Evelyn Harper, a retired elementary school teacher in her early 60s. She lived in the main house with a separate studio guest cottage overlooking a small orchard. Mrs. Harper met me at the gate wearing gardening gloves and a sun hat. Her handshake was firm and honest. "You're the biotech executive with a young family," she said simply. "I don't do gossip. Pay on time. Respect the quiet hours. That's all I ask." The guest cottage was perfect, light-filled, simple, with a small deck facing the trees. It smelled of lemon and fresh earth. I took it immediately. Moving some of my work things there gave me a place to breathe when the main house felt too full of noise and needs. Mrs. Harper didn't pry, but one evening as I sat on the deck with my laptop, she brought over a plate of fresh cookies. "Family trouble?" she asked casually. "Something like that." She nodded once. "Children teach you what really matters. Everything else is just noise. Don't let other people's noise drown out your own voice." Her words stayed with me. The messages from my family started arriving shortly after the party. "Mom, Olivia, we need to talk. What happened at the party was shocking. Lauren, I can't believe you didn't tell us. How could you let us think those things? Mom again, your sister's hurt. We all are. Call us." I took screenshots and saved them in a new folder titled, "When They Finally See." I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on what was real: bedtime stories with the children, late-night planning sessions with Rachel, quiet mornings on the deck at Mrs. Harper's where I could think without interruption. For the first time in years, the weight of their assumptions no longer sat on my shoulders. They had spent 5 years pitying a version of me that never existed, and I was finally free to stop protecting their illusion. The days began to settle into a rhythm that felt both familiar and newly mine. I woke early, drove to the lab while the hills were still wrapped in morning mist, and lost myself in the work that had always grounded me. The latest trial data for our cardiac valve device showed stronger outcomes than expected. Patients who once faced high-risk open-heart surgery now had a minimally invasive option with faster recovery times. Dr. Rachel Kim moved between stations with quiet intensity, occasionally glancing my way with a small nod that carried more weight than any family praise ever had. At Mrs. Harper's guest cottage in the evenings, the silence felt earned. I cooked simple meals, reviewed reports on the deck overlooking the orchard, and let the rustle of leaves replace the noise of pitying voices. No one asked why I wasn't married with children by now. No one offered gentle corrections about my supposed empty life. Mrs. Harper sometimes left fresh fruit from her trees on my doorstep without a word. Her quiet presence was never loaded. It was simply space. The messages from my family continued, but the tone had shifted from condescending sympathy to something closer to unease and accusation. "Mom, Olivia, your silence is hurting everyone. We deserve an explanation after what happened at the party. Lauren, I can't believe you let us think those things for years. How could you do that to your own family? Mom again, your sister's upset. She feels betrayed. Call us so we can talk like adults." I read each one carefully, then added the screenshots to the growing folder. I no longer felt the old pull to explain or defend. Their words revealed far more about the story they had built around me than about any genuine concern. I had been the older sister who never challenged their narrative. Now that I was no longer playing that role, the narrative was cracking. One afternoon, Dr. Kim called me into her office and closed the door. She slid a printed report across the desk. "The FDA review board is impressed," she said. "They want to fast-track the next phase. Your name is listed as lead inventor on the latest patent. This technology is going to reach more patients than we anticipated. I stared at the numbers. The potential impact was real. Fewer complications, shorter hospital stays, lives extended. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the kind of success my family would photograph and post. But it mattered. That evening I sat on the deck with my notebook, sketching improvements to the next prototype. Mrs. Harper appeared on the path below, carrying a small basket of lemons. "Heard through the local grapevine that your family has been asking around about you," she said casually. Not in a worried way. More like they're trying to rewrite a story that no longer fits. I set the notebook down. They built one version of me for years. Now the pieces don't match what they saw. Mrs. Harper gave a short nod. Children teach you that life doesn't follow other people's scripts. Don't let their disappointment become your burden. Her words lingered long after she walked away. A few nights later my phone rang while I was reviewing trial logs. I let it go to voicemail, then played it on speaker. Mom's voice filled the small cottage, starting soft and trembling before sharpening into familiar territory. "Olivia, this silence has gone on long enough. Your sister is hurt. Your father isn't sleeping well. We raised you better than this. Call us back so we can resolve this as a family." I listened to the entire message twice. Not because it hurt, but because I needed to hear the entitlement running beneath the tears. She didn't miss the real me. She missed the version she could pity and feel superior to. I saved the recording and added it to the folder. Then I turned off the phone and stepped onto the deck. The moon lit a silver path through the orchard. For the first time, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like breathing room I had finally claimed. At the lab the next day, Dr. Kim noticed the shift in me. During a break, she handed me a fresh cup of coffee. "You're carrying yourself differently," she observed. "Not physically. In here." She tapped her chest. "The work is yours, Olivia. The impact is yours. Stop waiting for permission to own it fully." I nodded. That afternoon, I finalized the documentation for the expanded trial. My name appeared clearly on every page, not buried in acknowledgments, but as the driving force behind the innovation. The quiet pride I felt wasn't loud or boastful. It was steady, like the heartbeat we were trying to protect. Through Mrs. Harper's subtle local connections, I caught fragments of how my absence was rippling through the family. My mother's book club lunches had grown awkward when old friends asked about me. Lauren's pregnancy updates carried an undercurrent of tension no one wanted to name. My father had apparently started asking questions about my real life. None of it was dramatic collapse. Just the slow exposure of what had always been there, a family system that only functioned when I stayed small and quiet in their story. I stopped replying to the messages entirely. Each day, without response, seemed to widen the gap between the narrative they told themselves and the reality they refused to see. One quiet evening, I sat on the deck with a single notebook, listing the things I had carried for years without acknowledgement. The holidays where I smoothed over tension, the quiet financial help when no one asked where it came from, the emotional labor of never challenging their assumptions. I had been the invisible buffer. Now the buffer was gone, and the pieces were shifting on their own. The conflict wasn't loud shouting or dramatic scenes. It was the steady realization that my leaving the old role had not broken the family. It had simply revealed what had always existed beneath their perfect surface. The knock came just after sunset, when the light over the orchard had turned soft gold and the evening air carried the faint scent of ripening fruit. I was sitting on the deck reviewing final trial notes when the sound cut through the quiet, firm, insistent, familiar. My shoulders tightened for a moment, that old reflex stirring, but I didn't freeze. I stood, walked down the steps, and opened the door. My mother stood on the wooden path, coat wrapped tightly despite the mild evening. Her face looked drawn, eyes red-rimmed, hair not quite as perfect as it had been at the party. She clutched her purse like armor. "Olivia," she said, voice cracking slightly. "We need to talk. This has gone on long enough." I kept one hand on the doorframe. "We're talking now." She glanced past me into the simple guest cottage, the plain furniture, the stacks of research notebooks, the view of the orchard beyond the railing. Judgment flickered across her face, the same look I had seen for years. Your sister is devastated, she continued, words coming faster. Your father isn't sleeping. The whole family is confused and hurt. You let us believe those things for 5 years. How could you do that to us? I listened without interrupting, the same steady way I monitored delicate trial data during critical phases. When she paused for breath, I spoke quietly. I didn't do anything to you. I left the party because you stood in front of 30 people and called me broken, damaged, incomplete. You turned Lauren's celebration into a public mourning for the life you thought I didn't have. Her mouth opened, then closed. Tears welled up quickly. We were worried about you. We only said those things because we love you and wanted better for you. Come back. We can fix this. We can be a family again. There it was. Not a real apology. Not acknowledgement of the public humiliation. Just the need for things to return to the way they had always been, with me small, quiet, and fitting their picture of what a woman should be. I opened the door a little wider, but stayed in the doorway. I carried a lot for this family, without anyone noticing. The holidays where I smiled through the comparisons. The quiet way I never challenged your assumptions. The emotional labor of letting you feel superior, because it kept the peace. I was the buffer that made your perfect family image possible. And when I stopped playing that role, you declare me broken rather than see who I actually am. Her face crumpled. You're making this sound worse than it was. We're your family. Families forgive mistakes. Families don't publicly pity their daughter and call her damaged goods in front of strangers, I said, my voice remaining even. You didn't shame me because I was failing. You did it because I refused to keep shrinking myself to make you comfortable. Now you're feeling the space I used to fill with my silence. She reached toward me, fingers trembling. Please. Your sister needs you. We all do. Just come back and we'll put this behind us. I looked at her hand, then back at her eyes. In that moment, the entire system stood exposed, not broken by my distance, but finally visible without me there to hide the cracks. The image they protected so carefully had always mattered more than the real person behind it. No, I said. I'm not coming back to the old role. I'm not fixing the family narrative. I'm not stepping into that version of me again. What's happening to you now isn't something I did to you. It's what was always there when I stopped hiding who I actually am. She stared at me, tears falling freely now. For the first time, she seemed to see me not as the tragic older sister, but as someone who had chosen herself. Her shoulders shook. You're being cruel. I shook my head slowly. I'm finally being honest. Maybe one day we can talk. But it won't be because you need me to make the family feel complete again. It will be because you've learned to see and respect the woman I actually am, not the version you pitted for 5 years. Behind her, Mrs. Harper's porch light clicked on. The older woman stepped out briefly, gave a small nod in my direction, then went back inside. Quiet support without words. My mother wiped her face, voice dropping to a whisper. This isn't you. It is now, I replied. She stood there a long moment, the evening breeze moving through the leaves, then turned and walked back to her car. The engine started, and she drove away too quickly, tires kicking up gravel on the quiet road. I closed the door, leaned against it, and let the adrenaline pass in slow waves. My knees felt unsteady, but I didn't cry. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Mrs. Harper, saw her leave. You stood your ground. Proud of you. I sent back a short thank you and set the phone down. Later that night, Dr. Rachel Kim called. I put her on speaker while I washed the few dishes from dinner. She didn't ask for every detail. She simply stayed on the line, talking about the latest trial adjustments, letting normal conversation fill the quiet. Her steady presence reminded me I wasn't rebuilding alone. The confrontation didn't bring dramatic apologies or instant change. It brought something quieter and heavier, the clear understanding that the family system had never been about unconditional love. The International Cardiac Innovation Conference was held in a sleek waterfront convention center in San Francisco. Banners featuring advanced medical imagery lined the halls, and the murmur of surgeons, researchers, and industry leaders filled the space. Our company had been invited to present the latest clinical results from our minimally invasive heart valve system. Because the technology was gaining significant traction, Dr. Rachel Kim asked me to lead the main session presentation. I almost declined when I learned my family planned to attend a charity networking luncheon in the same complex. Then I remembered the gender reveal party and decided I was done rearranging my life to avoid their discomfort. I wore a tailored navy blazer over a crisp white shirt, my hair pulled back neatly, and my company badge clearly visible. For the first hour, I moved through the crowd with quiet focus, answering questions about trial data, discussing device deployment with surgeons from different hospitals, and helping a young resident understand the real-world applications. I was good at this, useful in ways that had nothing to do with performing for my family's approval. Around midday, I saw them across the main atrium. My mother stood near a display table for the charity event, smiling tightly while speaking with donors. Lauren lingered nearby with Ryan, both of them scanning the room. They hadn't noticed me yet. Then a prominent cardiologist from Stanford recognized me and waved me over. Olivia Hale, the driving force behind the new valve system. Your work is changing outcomes for high-risk patients. Others joined. Dr. Kim introduced me to a panel of hospital directors, speaking clearly enough for nearby ears to hear. Olivia is the visionary behind this technology. We're fortunate to have her leading the way. The air shifted. I wasn't the pitted older sister anymore. I was the biotech executive whose devices were being adopted by major medical centers. Public confidence carried a weight no amount of family sympathy could match. My mother noticed first. Her face went pale, then tight. Lauren's conversation stopped mid-sentence. They exchanged glances before my mother approached, moving carefully through the crowd. Olivia, she said quietly, glancing around to see who might be listening. Can we speak? Somewhere private. I kept my hand steady on the tablet I was holding. We can speak here. She swallowed, eyes flicking to my badge and the group of professionals nearby. Everything at home has been difficult since the party. Your sister feels betrayed. Your father keeps asking about you. We're sorry for what was said. It got out of hand. Lauren joined her a moment later, looking more strained than I had ever seen her. We didn't know. We had no idea about any of this, the company, the children, any of it. We overreacted. I let their words settle in the bright afternoon light, surrounded by the normal sounds of the conference, presentations echoing from nearby rooms, quiet conversations, the distant hum of the bay. No dramatic scene. No raised voices. Just the truth I had carried quietly for years. You stood in front of 30 people and called me broken, I said evenly. You declared me incomplete and damaged because I didn't live the life you expected. That wasn't concern. That was you choosing your comfort over seeing me clearly. My mother's eyes filled. We're family. Families make mistakes and move forward. Families don't publicly pity their daughter and use her supposed tragedy to feel superior, I replied. I built something meaningful with my life. Something that actually helps people and saves lives. But none of that mattered until it became visible in a way you couldn't ignore. I'm not coming back to the old role. I'm not fixing the family image. What happened after the party isn't something I did to you. It's what was already there when I stopped hiding who I actually am. Lauren looked at the ground, shifting uncomfortably. We just want things to go back to normal. I shook my head slowly. Normal for you meant me staying small and quiet. I'm not small anymore. Maybe one day we can talk. But it won't be, because you need me to make the family feel complete again. It will be because you've learned to see and respect the woman I actually am, not the version you pitted. Dr. Kim called my name from the presentation area, needing help with the final setup. I turned back to my work without another word. They stood there a moment longer, my mother's shoulders trembling slightly, Lauren staring at my badge like she was seeing me for the first time. Then they walked away, disappearing into the crowd on the other side of the atrium. No big reunion. No tears that erased everything. Just me choosing my own path in full view, while they finally understood they were no longer the center of my story. Later, when the conference began to wind down and the bay lights started to glow, I stood alone near the exit. The sea air felt clean and steady. I pulled out my phone and looked at the old folder filled with screenshots and the voicemail from my mother. I listened to her words from the gender reveal for 5 seconds, then deleted everything. I didn't need the proof anymore. The consequences had already arrived in their own quiet way. My mother was learning that protecting an image didn't protect real connection. Lauren was discovering that superiority built on someone else's supposed pain eventually crumbles. And they all now knew I existed as a complete person, not just a supporting role in their narrative. I locked my phone and walked back toward the team packing up equipment. Mrs. Harper had texted earlier, simply saying she was proud of how far I had come. Dr. Kim gave me a quiet nod across the hall that said more than words ever could. That evening, back at the guest cottage, I sat on the deck with a cup of tea. The orchard was peaceful under the evening sky. For the first time since the gender reveal, the weight in my chest felt truly gone. I used to believe family love was supposed to be unconditional. Now I understood that love which only exists when you stay in the role they assigned isn't love at all.